Hey everybody, welcome to Hindsight 2020. I'm Steve O'Neill again, and man am I hungry. I'm sitting at the dinner table ready to go, and our topic today that we're going to talk about is something called risk appetite. Alright, that sounds weird. Risk appetite, what in the heck does that mean, and why does that play into our discussions? When people say risk, a lot of times they'll think immediately of insurance. And when they think of insurance, they typically think of a physical outage, such as a fire or a hurricane or a tornado. And while those are important, I think there's something else in our digital age today that's a whole lot more important. Okay, so I have an exercise that I want you to do that'll help you understand this. So what I need you to do right now is I need you to go out and find a pen and paper, please. And yes, you can hit that little button right in the middle of the screen here that pauses the video so you can go get a pen and paper. I'll give you 2 seconds. All right, good. Thank you for participating in doing that. So, on your piece of paper, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write down, without the aid of any device or anything like that, write down the phone number to your #1 customer or your #1 most important critical vendor. Ready, go. You're hesitating. Why? Probably because it's in a device somewhere, right? We lean on these, and that's okay, that's good, but now you see the problem or the risk that can come about your information being in something that maybe you don't have access to. So risk appetite. What in the world are we talking about again? So I think you understand the risk part, but I have a second exercise for you. This time with your piece of paper and your pen, what I'd like you to do, and you can cheat this time, you can use this device or another device, but what I'd like you to do is right now write down the names and contact info for the top 40 customers or the top 40 critical vendors you have. Ready, go. We're not going to go through that motion. Why? Because it would take a while. And even if you had this, could you get it done in 10 minutes? Well, take that a little further. Could you get it done in 10 seconds? Because when the disaster hits, it doesn't give you extra time. It doesn't allow you to do things like that. And a key thing that I think that happens with risk is that people immediately think that they have to get it all. They have to write down everything. They have to save it all. And that is not an efficient way to think about recovering the business. You need to identify what is your appetite for different pieces of your business. There are some things that you need to recover quickly, and they're very evident and very clear to you. There's other things not so much, or a question of, should this process be recovered quicker than that process? Are you thinking through that? Well, how you determine that and how you apply the right tool to solve that problem is something I like to call risk appetite, right? Appetite. It's something we look at and think about every day. I'm hungry. Okay, but do I want a big cheeseburger or do I want a small side salad? Do I want some fruit? What do I want? Okay, so maybe I haven't been with the salads a lot, but anyway, I like the big burgers, by the way. Well, when we develop something called risk appetite, we're identifying what is that risk appetite, how quickly, what are we scared about, and what level of risk do we attribute to that item. What are some ways we can talk about that? A lot of times that'll come back into the age-old, the classic own it versus rent it, or own it versus lease it, which sometimes falls into the world in recovery of dedicated recovery or maybe a shared recovery. And we'll talk about pieces of that. All right, I'm still hungry, but let's go take a look at some ideas, and hopefully I can help you get this idea of this risk appetite, and then we can come back and chow down. Thanks. The best way I could think to explain this is let's walk through the issue of the risk around transportation. For me, personally, how am I going to get from A to B? And we're going to look at 3 different options to hopefully help explain this thing of risk appetite and why it's important. What is that risk? Let's identify that, right? When we did the phone exercise, it was information. In this particular case, I'm going to go through the risk of what would happen if I lost my transportation to get around. And we're going to look at the three options, one of which might be what I would call the first thing people would think of as the dedicated option, which is I have another car on standby. So with this option, I have a car, for whatever reason my transportation breaks down, I can't use it. What's my backup plan? Oh, I have another car. And this is probably the number one thing that many businesses think about doing, is they think about, well, I'll just replicate. I'll just have some stuff in backup. I'll just have some stuff ready to go, already purchased. Well, there's some good pros with that, but there's also cons. So let's talk about the pros. I own it, right? So if I went out and had another vehicle like this sitting in the background, well, I own it. I can get in it whenever I want and go. I have full control. There are no contracts. I can do what I want to do. And that's a great pro. But the cons, what are the cons? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't have $40,000 just sitting around doing nothing where I could have a car sitting somewhere, maybe in this driveway, that I could use. So that's a con because it's quite a bit of money. Not only the CapEx, but I would tell you that the number one problem I see with this solution, of a dedicated solution, if you will, is the operating expenses. People forget about that. It's always exciting when you think about buying a new car. Oh, I'm gonna get a new car, and you think about the price of the car, but you don't always think about the price of, what about these tires, right? We gotta put oil in it. We've gotta do different updates. Now, maybe on this we don't have to do technology updates, but if we apply this same thing to servers, laptops, any kind of IT equipment, we've got to update that all the time. So it's a constant thing that you have to do, and here's the biggest problem, or the biggest issue with a dedicated solution, is that I may never use it. So now I have a backup car sitting somewhere that costs me money, that is waiting on something. I have to maintain it to make sure it's ready to go. 3 years, 5 years goes by, I didn't use it at all. Well, that's not money well spent. So let's look at option number 2. Option number 2, you may have already thought about it, a rental car. And that's a good idea, that's not a bad idea. And there's pros and cons with this option as well. So remember, I've got no transportation. I've got to figure out what I'm going to do, and I've decided that having a backup car is just too expensive. So, rental car, good option? No. Yeah, there's some good pros to this. One, they have a large selection. There's multiple vendors. That's a good thing. I can pick different models. I can pick a truck. I can pick something else besides this model. So that's good. Well, one problem is I don't have all control, right? So I can't just walk up to this and get in. I've got to have keys, and I've got to get maybe a contract before I can get the keys. Remember the problem with operating expenses? Well, here's a pro. We don't have to worry about operating expenses at all. The oil, the tires, we let the rental company deal with that. But the biggest pro of all, the one that's really enticing, is the fact that I don't have to pay for this until I'm using it. Well, that works out really well, because if I don't have a disaster, then I don't need it. Great. All right, but there's always cons. So what are the cons with this? Well, one con is that you might have to wait to get it. It might be a while before you can get there and get the paperwork done and get the keys. And that can be a problem. The other problem that I see a lot with many people going with this is what we would call a first come, first serve solution. And what that means is I hear a lot of organizations and businesses say, oh, well, we'll just put our people in a hotel, or we'll just go to another location. Well, here's the problem with that. Were you the first one to go do that? Because if you're not, then you're going to get to the car lot, and the other key thing, or something I think that's important when you go with this option, is the paperwork, right? And here's the paperwork for a car rental. I always find it interesting with contracts and something called contract exclusions. And rental car companies, so if I was looking at this as an option, would be no different. Something here that's interesting: any damage or loss resulting from any act of war, insurrection, rebellion, or revolution. Yikes, that's a little scary. And here's one that I've always found interesting. a little scary, loss due to a nuclear detonation, and they put in parentheses, even if accidental. Yikes. And then loss due to radioactive contamination. Now, yes, of course, these are pretty obscure, pretty detailed, and I don't think I'm going to have to worry about that if I was just trying to get from A to B. But my point is that contracts you have to look through. You have to make sure that you understand what are you getting when you sign the contract. Good, bad, don't know until you read the contract. All right, option number 3. Okay, yeah, it's crude, it's simple, but guess what? It'll get me from A to B. Now, there are pros and cons to this, obviously. One pro, full control. I got this, I can jump on it, I can go. There's no contract, that's another plus. Capital expense, a lot cheaper than a car. Operating expense, yeah, you've got to do some operating expense stuff here, but it's trivial. It's not that much in the big scheme of things. So there are pros to this, but there's also cons, as with anything. So what are the cons? Not a lot of amenities here. If it's going to be raining, storming, well, this is my only option. Can I have any other passengers with me? No. Maybe that's not a problem. Maybe that's okay. And obviously a slower travel time. It's going to take me a lot longer to get from point A to point B in this than it would be a car. We're going to talk back at the dinner table again about that risk appetite, but hopefully you're starting to get a sense of you have to look at the options and identify what is the appetite that you have for that problem. Because you could get a car and you could have that sitting there, or I could decide that I'm going to rent at time, or I could decide to do this. So there is another option that can be kind of scary to think of, but I can tell you there are some corporations that do it. When the solution or the product that they're creating and the business has problems and things start to not work, the brakes don't work, suddenly the pedals, you've got a flat tire, something in the business isn't working and a disaster strikes, all of a sudden they say forget it and they walk away from the business. All right, welcome back. I hope that gave you an idea of the different options and what they mean when it comes to trying to identify a risk and a solution for a risk. Each of those options have goods and bads. Then you take that information and those ideas, you identify your risks across multiple elements. The people, the facility, the power, the data backup, communications. You need to look at what is your response and what is your risk appetite for those different elements of your business. And that's doing the right thing. There have been companies that have done this well, and there have been other companies that have not done so well. I like to think of the picture of a snowplow. Beautiful snowplow, obviously, but probably lots of money to keep that going. And I've seen an organization do that where they had a major outage and they learned from that and decided that their approach was to build a dedicated facility in another city. They went out, they spent the money, built the facility, had lots of laptops, desktops, printers, the network, everything was set up exactly how they needed it. And then they had to maintain that. So they had to go update it, check on things, check on the network, keep it updated, keep the circuits, keep the power, pay all those costs. Remember those operating expense costs? They paid all those costs, but then after 3 years, they started looking at the books and they said, man, that is expensive. We just spent a ton of money. And here was the problem. Nothing had happened. No disaster events had happened during that time that they needed to worry about. So they had to revisit that solution and identify if that was the right thing to do. On the other hand, there's been other companies that I've seen that will decide, okay, we have an IT group, we have good budget dollars and good procurement. Let's go out and purchase all of this stuff and store it at a location. Okay, good idea, but once they took that equipment, put it in the back closet, who updated it? Who went back and checked on it from time to time? And then what really got them into trouble is that as they had regular fires, as IT deals with, the executive's laptop did this, it didn't work, the accounting team couldn't print, they went, oh, wait a minute, there's that equipment in that back closet that we can go get. And so they would go to that back closet, they would cannibalize that equipment, take a hard drive out, take whatever parts they needed. They would fix the immediate need, and that was a whole lot better than telling an executive with the company, nope, sorry, you gotta wait a couple of days till we get this equipment in. But what they caused was a problem, maybe like this snowplow. It was a good idea, but the question is, did you invest the time, effort, and dollars in it so that you know you could rely upon it when it worked? And in that case, they suddenly had a disaster. They pulled all this equipment out of the closet. None of it was updated. Pieces and parts were missing, and they realized that was not a good strategy. My personal opinion of the best approach is a hybrid. It's identifying not the same solution across the board, because each of your elements have different factors that play into it, but identifying what's most important, applying the right option for that. It's unique in a way where the snowplow was good for our visual effects to understand what I was trying to get across, but possibly another way to think about it in your business is maybe a boat. So one option is you could have a boat dedicated and it's you, like this picture. Here we go, there's the lifeboat. There's only two, you're good, right? Another option is the other lifeboat. Lots of other people use it. You hope that everybody works together. You hope that you've got availability and you can get in the boat and you're good. Or the third option, unfortunately, is no boat at all. And that's not good. Besides the hybrid approach, another thing that I think is important to do is to revisit your risk appetite. At least monthly, yearly, of course, because your risk appetite will change over time. Another way you could look at this is like your deductible for insurance on your car or your house. Maybe when we start off, we don't have a lot of capital. We don't have a lot of money that we can use to recover from an incident. So we transfer that risk to the insurance company. Over time, hopefully you sort that out, you gain more money, and you can then raise your deductible so that you put more skin in the game, but over time will save you money. It's the same concept with a risk appetite. Maybe you started off at this level and decide that the third option is the right way to go and work your way towards the dedicated option. That's a great plan. At least you have a plan. Talk to other people, compare stories so that you can identify what they did or didn't do. Thanks very much for sitting through this and listening, and I hope you learned something. Hope you got some ideas. I hope it sparks discussions, all of that. Our next segment is going to be on communications, and regardless of the solution you choose and how your strategy is and what your risk appetite, communications is absolutely one of the primary things you've got to sort out, and we're going to dive into that on the next.
Are you done? Your salad's ready?
Hey, all right. Oh, that reminds me, sometimes it's also smart that you let someone else look at your risk appetite because they might have better eyes on it. Maybe they've experienced more, or maybe sometimes we get caught up and maybe I want a steak or some ice cream right now, but I need somebody to tell me apparently there's a salad coming.